In this video, we're going to go ahead and install Android Studio. Now, this is a video for Mac users. If you're running Windows, refer to your own separate video in this section that's hopefully clearly labeled, which will go through and show you how to install it on a Windows machine. And that's because the process is different, even though the application does look very, very much the same. So, Mac users, let's get into the video. Okay, so let's set up Android Studio for the Mac. First things first, we'll go to Google. We're going to do a search for Android Studio download. Okay, it'll probably be that first option there on the screen, so select that one. Okay, you can see there it does confirm it's a beta version and got all sorts of other bits and pieces. Just a note here, it does talk about using the SDK manager or SDK manager. But the thing is, we're going to be using the SDK manager from Eclipse or from Android Developer Tools, which we've installed previously in this course. So if you haven't installed Android Developer Tools, I suggest you do that before installing Android Studio, because we're going to be relying on the SDK manager that's configured with that. Okay, so we just need to download it. And obviously this link will change depending on your computer, whether you've got a Mac, Windows, or you're running Linux. It supports all three of those. It's got a version for each. So we're just going to download that, and that's a zip file. We're just going to unzip that in the folder that we want to execute the program in. Now with Android Studio, it's a little bit different to the Eclipse setup in that we actually get like a package executable file, and we can put that directly into our applications folder. Unlike Eclipse, where we sort of created a subfolder and put the files in there. And just out of interest, if you're on Windows, it does the opposite. It doesn't have an installation script. So I don't know why the difference between the two, but bottom line is that we'll get this, we'll unzip it, and we'll copy this folder to the applications folder. And we'll copy this file to the applications folder, and we'll be good to go. Just pause it there a little bit to save a bit of time. We're just about done now. Okay, we'll go to that folder, and I'm just going to unzip it here. Double click it and extract it. Now this is in my downloads folder. You notice how it's just the one file. It hasn't got sort of a whole series of subdirectories or anything like that. It's just one executable file. Again, I'm not sure why they've done it this way compared to Windows, which has now got sort of a complete set of files and sort of subdirectories. But we're just going to drag that into applications, like so. And it should have copied it there. And we'll just make sure in applications we should have Android Studio. So we're good to go. And once we've done that, because it's in there, I'm going to just delete it in here. Okay, so I'm just going to hold down Command and press space and type Android. But you could just have easily have clicked into applications and double-clicked the application to start it that way. And again, just confirmation that it's been downloaded. We know that. We're going to open. Got a message here. Do we want to import our settings from a previous version of Android Studio? Well, no, because we don't have a previous version, so I'm just going to click OK. Okay, and you can see it's loaded up pretty fast and we're good to go. Next step, we need to go into our Configure menu over here and make sure SDK Manager is set up properly. I'm going to click into that. Now what this should be doing is going into the existing SDK manager that was configured, and you can see actually up there at the top, it's using that very folder, developer/ADP bundle from the Android Developer Tools, because there's no point re-downloading all the software development kits and all the 8 different API levels, because look, we've done it once. So that's the good thing about doing this. They're both just going to use what has already been downloaded. Okay, and we'll just check that we have actually got everything installed. You can see we've got our documentation, SDK platform. We've got some images which we downloaded previously, and we've also got the Google APIs, which is good. And we've also got Haxum. Incidentally, there's an update there. We've also got a support library. Whenever you do see an update to a support library, I recommend to always make sure you install it. It can be quite useful, and we'll do the same for Haxum. Install both packages. So you may or may not get that with your install, but I do suggest you do that anyway. So we'll just download that, and what we'll do is we'll rerun Haxum just to get that latest update to make sure we're running the very latest version. It's always a good idea to do that. For some reason that hasn't sort of taken the second one, so maybe I didn't click on the agreement license, so I'm going to click on that and install. And hopefully that'll just download it. And if you recall, we then need to go into the folder, the subfolder, and install that. Now again, remember the folder, this is updating and sort of putting all the files in, is the Android Developer Tools folder. So if you go ahead and delete this at some future point in time, you'll find Android Studio will stop working. So you do want to make sure you keep both sort of applications there. And look, I do suggest you always have Eclipse, or aka Android Developer Tools, and Android Studio installed anyway, because invariably you're going to find there's a project that you'll get from someone you'll need to open, and it'll use one or the other sort of tool. So even if you know at this point forward you're only going to use Android Studio, what I'm saying is keep the Android Developer Tools there just in case. Okay, so we're done now with the SDK manager. We'll close that down. Now what we'll do, I'm just going to close down Android Studio while we update Hexam. We're going to go back into the folder, and if you remember, it was in the bundle folder, SDK subfolder, extras, Intel, hardware accelerated execution manager, and you can see looking at the date, the time over here, that essentially this is the latest version. And then just a reminder, 10.9 and above, or for below 10.9. If you don't know how to do that, go into click about this Mac. This tells me that I'm running 10.9.5. So therefore, because I'm running that, it's for below 10.9, 10.9 and above. So I'm going to use this top one. Now that's changed, I believe, from the last time we installed this. I think it was 10.10 and above. I'm going to install it. Just make sure I've got the latest version. And again, it's just saying, but you've already got it installed, but we know that. Continue. Just a quick note here I want to add. Depending on the amount of RAM you've got on your computer, you may want to tone this down. Now, I've got 32 gigabytes of RAM on my computer. I've got ample. So for me to have 2,000, that's only sort of 1/16 of the amount of RAM effectively. So, you know, if you've only got 4 gig or 8 gig, I would suggest you drop this down to 512. Okay, so I'm going to leave it on mine at 2048 though, because I've got enough RAM to get away with that. Password. And once this is done, we'll just go into Android Studio and just have a bit of a quick play with it. Just sort of set up a sample project to make sure that things are working as they should be. Okay, it's now finished. Close. I can close that. And I can go back to applications, or I could have just pressed my command space again. Android Studio. We'll fire that up. Now what I want to do is just show you how to set up a new project, purely to see how it's a little bit different than our Android Developer Tools. First things first, when you enter your domain, and if you remember with the package in the last, with Android Developer Tools, they wanted you just purely to enter the package name, and you had to sort of remember to put things back to front. They put the com first, and then the first part of the domain. They've changed a little bit with the application name and the company domain working. And what you do now is you sort of put my first sort of Android Studio test, for argument's sake. It's the name of the project, and you can see what it's doing there. It's already writing that out. But if we change our domain name, and let's just say it was timbachowka.com, which is one of my domains. You can see how it's doing this for you automatically. So it's just a different way of doing it, making it a little bit easier. Project location, you should set that up. By default, you can see where it's putting the projects. Just to be consistent, I'm going to change that. And I'm going to go to my desktop. And I'm going to, here, create a new folder. And I'm going to create a subfolder called Android Studio Projects. I'm doing it that way just to make sure there's no chance that I'm going to overwrite any of the old Android Developer Tool projects. Click OK. And the file name is still, remember, that's the file name for the project. So I can click OK. And just confirming now, yes, that's now my desktop. And that's all good to go. So click on Next. Now you notice also this screen has changed. Well, obviously it's changed because it's a different package, but what I'm saying is that what it's coming up with is completely different to Android Developer Tools. Now one of the good things about using a product that's written by Google is, of course, they can give you very accurate stats on what devices are being run by people. And the way that they can do that is every time someone downloads an app from Google Play, they know effectively what devices people are running. And it's very interesting here. They're saying API 15, which was ice cream sandwich, it will be running on approximately 87.9%. So we can change it. What I suggest we do anyway to be consistent is we'll stick to API 16, and you can see it's 4.1, but it's only 78%. But obviously, as we go down the list to older versions, we're getting to the stage of more devices being able to run our code. But of course, there's then an overhead on us trying to support those older APIs that haven't got some of the features that we want and need to use. So it's your choice as to which one you want to do. I'm still targeting API 16 as I have throughout the course. It's still already at this stage 78% of the devices, and that's literally just going to be going up over time. And also, if you wanted to run a TV, Android TV or a Google Wear application, you would tick the relevant box and then choose the relevant API. We aren't going to do that. The other thing you probably notice here, there's no target API. Android Developer Tools gave you a target SDK or API, and they haven't got one. And that's because they assume you're targeting the very latest version you've got installed. And of course, you can sort of see there, even though it's grayed out, that's API 21 Android 5 Lollipop. So it's going to be using that by default. Okay, so we'll move on. Now this is a little bit different also. You can see there's a lot of different types of default apps that you can start off with Android Studio. This one over here is quite interesting, a Google Maps activity, but there's also there's a games one over here, a tabbed one, master flow, etc. So just for this test, we're just going to select the basic blank one. But essentially, it's still doing very similar things to what Android Developer Tools did. It's just in a slightly different format. So I'm going to click on Next. Activity name, layout. You're probably looking at those. They probably look very familiar now because we've been using those a little bit in some of our other apps that we've created. I'm going to leave that all as the default for this first test and click on Finish. And now what will happen is Android Studio will go and create our first project. Now, just a note there, you can see that it is downloading some things. So it sometimes will take a while, especially the first time you run this, will it download some of the various bits and pieces that it needs. So we'll just leave it chugging away for a little while. Gradle, which we'll talk about in future videos, is the build sort of tool that's built into Android Studio, by the way. Again, you should find with subsequent projects, after you've sort of created this first initial project, they will be faster to build as well. In the next video, we're going to go through a bit of a walkthrough of Android Studio and some of the different functionalities and sort of the layout of the app and see how it's changed a little bit, just so you become familiar with that. But we'll do that in the next video. But we'll just let this finish off. Okay, so you can see it was very slow, but we did get there eventually. And it's now loading, as you can see in the background. And just an initial comment about the tips of the day. Do suggest you look at those where possible because you'll often get some good useful tips on how to do various things, like shortcuts and so forth. For example, there you can see like command space to complete it, how to find usages, and we'll be going through some of these things anyway. But bottom line, if you've got the time, go through and look at some of those, or at least just look at the ones as they start up because there's some useful things in there. Okay, well, I'm not going to go into this any further now. Bear in mind that very first project does seem to take a long time, so don't get too concerned if you're waiting. I think it took 3 or 4 minutes on my computer, which is quite a fast one, so it's just one of those things that's sort of downloading things and validating, etc. It's all pretty normal, but we'll be going through in the next video a bit more of an overview of the project and going through the various folders and so forth. A lot of what we've learnt already is still applicable with Android Studio. Like, for example, the layout names are going to be similar. It's still got an RES folder. The Java code's still there, but there's extra things like unit tests and those types of things. And we'll be going through some of those anyway and just giving you a bit of an understanding of how it all works in the next video.